After my son's death, my grandson chose me. In court, my daughter-in-law told the judge it was a lie. The sound of her voice still echoed inside my chest, sharp enough to make my fingers clutch the edge of the bench until my knuckles throbbed. It had been 8 long months since we buried my only son, Daniel, and I still hadn't learned how to breathe in a world without him. And now, as if grief wasn't enough, I was fighting for the only part of him left. His 12-year-old boy, Noah. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. This story gets much more intense, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. The courtroom smelled faintly of polished wood and dust, the kind of air that felt heavy, as though it had already absorbed years of heartbreak and battles. Noah sat a few feet away from me, his back too straight for a child, shoulders tucked inside a stiff navy jacket that made him look like a little man. He hated that jacket. I knew, because he'd told me just last week how itchy the collar was. But Clara, his mother, insisted it would look respectable. Respectable, when half the time she didn't even notice if his socks were mismatched or if he wore the same shirt 3 days in a row. Judge Harris, an older man with silver-framed glasses that he adjusted too often, leaned forward, his tired eyes resting on Noah. Is that true, young man? Do you really want to live with your mother? For a moment, the silence in the courtroom became unbearable. Even the hum of the ceiling fan seemed to pause. My lawyer's hand pressed mine gently, a wordless reminder to stay calm, but the knot in my chest grew tighter. I knew how these things went. Courts favored biological parents. No matter how many nights Noah had cried himself to sleep at my house, no matter how many times Clara had cancelled school meetings or forgotten his doctor appointments, she was still his mother. Noah's thin frame shifted slowly as he stood up. His knees trembled slightly, though he tried to mask it. At 12, he was at that fragile stage. Still a boy, but with a voice that sometimes cracked as if his body couldn't decide whether to let him grow. And when he looked up, his eyes, Daniel's eyes, met mine for just a second. It hit me like a punch, that familiar shade of deep hazel, the same eyes that once shone with my son's laughter. I felt grief surge up my throat, but I swallowed it down. This was Noah's moment. Your Honor, he began softly, and then, gathering a surprising steadiness, may I show you something first? From his pocket, he pulled out his phone. The same one I had given him on his birthday, because Clara had forgotten their appointment to upgrade his old one, again. He held it with both hands, as if it was something sacred. Clara's face, which had been carefully arranged in soft lines of motherly concern, faltered for the first time. Objection, she blurted, her voice just a little too sharp. Whatever he recorded, it's without my consent. That's illegal. Judge Harris lifted a hand, silencing her. Mrs. Stone, in family court, I have broad discretion. If the recording sheds light on the minor's welfare, I'll decide its admissibility. Noah, go ahead. The phone speaker crackled, and suddenly the courtroom filled with Clara's real voice. Not the gentle rehearsed tone she had just used for the judge, but the cutting one Noah and I knew too well. Stop packing that bag, Noah. You're not going to your grandmother's tonight. But Mom, you said I could. You and Greg have the concert. Plans change. Greg doesn't like how it looks when you're always at her place. Once this custody mess is over, you won't be spending so much time there anyway. And stop arguing. You sound just like your father, always difficult. Look, we're moving to Arizona when this is done. Greg's new job has a house with a pool. You'll love it. What about Grandma Evelyn? What about Dad's house? What about my friends? She's not your parent. I am. Enough. Noah. End of discussion. A loud slam echoed, followed by muffled sobs, the kind I had heard too many times through the walls of my home when Noah thought I was asleep. The judge's face didn't move much, but his eyes shifted, darker now, sharper. Clara's complexion had drained, her lips pressing together so tightly they nearly disappeared. Noah, the judge asked gently, is there more? Noah's fingers shook slightly as he scrolled. Yes, sir. This part is from later last night, when Mom thought I was asleep. The next voice was Clara's again, this time speaking low, not to Noah but to Greg, her boyfriend of barely half a year. The lawyer said once I have full custody, we can tap into Noah's trust fund easier. That old woman won't be able to block us. Between the house and Daniel's insurance money, it's more than enough for a fresh start. Greg's chuckle followed, smug and calculating. And the kid? He'll come around. especially once he sees the pool. I could feel the air thicken. The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. I looked at Noah, his small chest rising and falling rapidly, his jaw clenched hard enough to hurt. My stomach twisted. A boy who had already lost his father was now standing in front of strangers, forced to prove his own mother's neglect and greed. When the recording stopped, Judge Harris leaned back, removed his glasses, and pinched the bridge of his nose. His silence was deafening. My heart pounded in the hollow of my ribs. "That'll be all for now," he finally said, his voice heavy. "We'll take a short recess before continuing." As people stood, the sound of shuffling shoes filled the room, but I remained frozen. I had wanted the truth to be seen, but hearing it this way, watching Noah expose it with his own hands, broke something inside me. Beside me, my attorney whispered, "This changes everything, Evelyn. Judges don't take kindly to financial motives in custody." But there was no victory in my chest. Only sorrow, thick and unyielding, as my grandson leaned against me, whispering, "I'm sorry, Grandma. I didn't want to embarrass her." I wrapped my arms around him, whispering back, "You have nothing to apologize for, Noah. Nothing at all." When the judge called for a recess, people slowly began filing out of the courtroom, their conversations hushed but buzzing with the weight of what they had just heard. My legs felt heavy, as if they didn't belong to me, but Noah's small hand slipped into mine, grounding me in that moment. He hadn't held my hand in public for years, said it was too childish when he turned 9, but now he clung to me like he used to when thunder scared him at night. The gesture nearly broke me. I bent down slightly, whispering, "You did so well, sweetheart. You were brave." His voice was quiet, shaky but determined. "I didn't want to. But I had to, Grandma. If I didn't, no one would believe me." I kissed the top of his hair, breathing in the faint smell of the shampoo I had put in his overnight bag. It smelled like home, at least to me. My chest ached knowing a 12-year-old boy had carried the burden of proving his own mother's truth. Children weren't supposed to protect adults. They weren't supposed to strategize about trust funds or legal battles. They were supposed to worry about homework, bike rides, and whether the cafeteria was serving pizza or meatloaf. We walked out into the hallway where the polished marble floor reflected the sterile fluorescent lights above. My lawyer, Ms. Parker, leaned close, lowering her voice. "That recording gave us leverage, Evelyn. The judge is going to look at this case differently now. Financial exploitation changes everything." Her words were meant to comfort me, but they barely registered. I wasn't thinking about leverage or winning. All I could see was Noah's pale face. His lips pressed into a thin line, his eyes darting nervously every time someone passed us. He wasn't a child celebrating victory. He was a boy who had just stripped away the mask of the only parent he had left. From across the hall, Clara emerged, her steps quick, her head bowed slightly. For just a fleeting second, her eyes met mine. There was no shame in them, no remorse, only a flicker of cold anger. The same woman my son once loved enough to marry, the same woman I once welcomed into my family, now looked at me like I was her enemy. She hurried past us, her attorney whispering furiously in her ear, and Noah instinctively gripped my hand tighter. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "She hates me now, doesn't she?" I turned, forcing my voice steady. "No, Noah. She's angry, but she doesn't hate you. She's your mother. That won't change." But inside, I wasn't sure if I believed my own words. We found a bench near the courthouse entrance, and Noah sank down, pulling his knees slightly together, his small shoulders hunched. He looked so much younger than 12 just then, his hair falling into his eyes, his phone still clutched tightly in his hand. I reached out, brushing his hair aside. "Grandma," he said suddenly, his voice breaking, "what if the judge still sends me with her? What if he doesn't care about the recording?" The panic in his eyes was raw, and it pulled me back to a night just 3 months after Daniel's funeral. Noah had shown up at my door in pajamas, clutching his backpack. He hadn't said much, just asked if he could sleep over. Later, after I tucked him into the blue room, the same one I'd painted for him when he was a toddler, he had whispered, "I don't like being at Mom's anymore. She doesn't notice me. Sometimes she doesn't even cook." That night I made him grilled cheese and hot cocoa, and he ate as though he hadn't seen a warm meal in days. Now, staring at him on the bench, I realized this courtroom wasn't just about custody. It was about survival. I leaned close, gripping his hand gently. "Listen to me. Noah. Whatever happens, I'm not going to stop fighting for you. Do you hear me? You are not alone in this. His eyes welled up, and he nodded quickly, blinking away tears. I know. I miss Dad so much. He'd know what to do. The name stung like fresh salt on an open wound. Daniel. My sweet boy who never came home from that highway accident. He had been a devoted father, the kind who read bedtime stories even after 12-hour shifts, who built blanket forts in the living room on rainy weekends. He updated his will just weeks before the accident, almost as if he knew he had to protect Noah's future. And now, I was the only one left to carry out that promise. The bailiff's voice echoed down the hallway, calling everyone back inside. Noah's hand squeezed mine again before we stood. His face pale but composed. He was ready. Or at least, as ready as any child could be when forced to fight against his own mother. When we stepped back into the courtroom, Clara was already seated, her face perfectly composed again, but I saw the cracks. Her mascara was smudged slightly beneath her eyes, though her lips were curved into a forced smile. She looked at the judge as though he alone held the power to rewrite her image, to erase what had just been heard. Judge Harris adjusted his glasses and shuffled a few papers, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched until I thought my heart might stop. Then he cleared his throat, his voice calm but firm. We'll resume. I've reviewed the evidence presented. Mrs. Stone, would you like to respond to your son's recording before we proceed? Clara's chair creaked as she stood, her tears falling almost on cue. Your Honor, I've been under immense stress since Daniel passed away. I may have said things I didn't mean, but Noah knows I love him more than anything. I am his mother. I've made mistakes, but that doesn't mean he shouldn't live with me. I bit down on my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Mistakes? That's what she called leaving him hungry? Forgetting to sign his homework? Planning to use his inheritance for her boyfriend's new life? Noah's little body stiffened beside me, but he stayed silent, his eyes fixed on the floor. And in that moment I knew, this battle was far from over. Clara wasn't going to surrender easily. She had something to lose, and when people were desperate, they became dangerous. I straightened my shoulders, whispering to Noah without looking at him. No matter what she says, remember the truth. We know it. The judge knows it. And your father, wherever he is, knows it too. Noah nodded slightly, his lips pressed tight, and for the first time that day, I saw a spark in his eyes. He wasn't just my grandson anymore. He was Daniel's son, brave, steady, and ready to fight for the life he deserved. The courtroom air felt colder when Clara sat down again, her eyes shimmering with practiced tears. She pressed a tissue against her cheek, her gaze darting toward the judge as though she could convince him with nothing more than sorrow painted across her face. To anyone who didn't know her, she might have looked like a grieving widow, a mother fighting to keep her child close. But I knew better. I had seen the neglect, the carelessness, the selfish choices hidden behind that mask. Beside me, Noah sat stiffly, his little hands balled into fists on his lap. His phone still peeked out of his pocket, like a secret weapon he hadn't wanted to use but had been forced to. His shoulders were tense, his jaw set. And as I watched him, my heart cracked. No 12-year-old should have to fight battles like this, least of all against his own mother. Judge Harris let the silence stretch, his eyes flicking between Clara and Noah. Then he turned back to my grandson. Noah, you've been very brave today. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we continue? Noah swallowed, his throat bobbing visibly. He looked at me for the briefest moment, and I gave the smallest nod, letting him know he didn't have to, but also that if he chose to, I'd be right there. Yes, Your Honor, he whispered. His voice trembled, but the words pushed through. I don't want to move. My dad always said home is where people care about you. And I feel that with Grandma. She makes sure I eat, makes sure I get to school, makes sure I don't feel alone. I don't feel that at Mom's house anymore. The way he said, anymore broke me. It wasn't an attack. It was grief. Grief for what he had once had with her. Grief for what he had lost. Clara shifted in her seat, her lips tightening as though she wanted to interrupt, but the judge lifted a hand, stopping her. Why don't you feel that with your mother? He asked gently. Noah's eyes filled, but he blinked hard, fighting the tears. His voice came out in small, uneven bursts. She's busy a lot. With Greg. Sometimes she forgets things. Like dinner. Or homework. Or she cancels when she said we'd do something. And sometimes. His voice cracked, the child beneath the brave mask breaking through. Sometimes she says Dad's not here because he always made things hard. That's not true. He was the best. I felt my breath catch, my chest tightening until I thought I might choke. The judge nodded solemnly. Thank you, Noah. That was very important for me to hear. Noah sat down slowly, his legs trembling as he tucked them back under the bench. I wanted to gather him in my arms right there, to tell him he was safe, but all I could do was rest my hand on his shoulder, feeling the rapid beat of his little heart beneath his blazer. Clara, never one to sit silently for long, dabbed at her eyes and stood again. Your Honor, I know how this looks. But I am grieving too. My husband died. I've made mistakes, yes, but all parents do. I've tried my best. Maybe I forgot a school form, maybe I was late sometimes, but doesn't every mother struggle? Doesn't every family have rough patches? It doesn't mean my son should be taken from me. The words stung, not because they were true, but because of how easily she twisted reality into a performance. She could turn neglect into struggles, selfish choices into mistakes. My lawyer rose calmly, her voice firm but measured. Your Honor, the question here is not whether Mrs. Stone has had struggles. The question is whether Noah's best interests are served under her care. We've presented clear evidence that he has found stability with his grandmother, Evelyn. He has spent more nights in her home than his mother's in the past 8 months. The recordings, along with testimony from neighbors and teachers, all point to a consistent pattern. Mrs. Stone's priorities have not been her child's welfare. Clara let out a sharp laugh, though it sounded more like desperation than humor. Neighbors? Teachers? Everyone is out to make me look bad because they think Evelyn's some kind of saint. She's not. She's just an old woman trying to replace me. The word replace sliced through me. I bit my lip so hard I tasted iron again. I never wanted to replace Clara. I just wanted to protect my grandson from her carelessness, from her choices. The judge's brow furrowed at her outburst. Mrs. Stone, I suggest you choose your words carefully. This court is concerned with the child's welfare, not your grievances. Clara's face flushed red, and she sat back down quickly, muttering something under her breath that I couldn't catch. Noah leaned slightly toward me, whispering so only I could hear. She doesn't even know she's making it worse, does she? I squeezed his hand under the bench, whispering back. No, sweetheart. She doesn't. The judge shuffled his papers again, his sigh audible. We'll proceed with final arguments tomorrow morning. For now, Noah will remain with his grandmother. Court is adjourned for today. The sound of the gavel cracked like thunder, and suddenly the room was buzzing with movement again. My heart thudded, relief mixing with dread. Today was only the beginning. Tomorrow could change everything. As we stood, Noah looked up at me, his face pale but resolute. Grandma, if he sends me with her, will you still try to see me? The question nearly shattered me. I bent down, cupping his face in my hands. Noah, listen to me. I will never let you go. Not really. Whatever happens, you are mine. You are Daniel's son. You are family. And family doesn't walk away. His lip trembled, but he nodded. He needed to believe me. And I needed to make sure my promise was one I could keep. As we walked out of the courthouse, Clara's eyes followed us from across the hall. There was no softness in her gaze, no sadness. Just calculation. And I realized then that this wasn't just about custody for her. It was about control. And she wasn't going to give it up without a fight. The courthouse steps felt steeper than they had that morning. Maybe it was the exhaustion in my bones, or maybe it was the weight of everything pressing down on me. But each step with Noah at my side felt heavier than the last. The late afternoon sun glared against the polished stone, casting long shadows across the crowd spilling onto the sidewalk. Reporters lingered near the entrance, whispering and pointing as families filed out. Custody hearings drew curiosity like moths to a flame, though none of them truly cared about the lives being torn apart inside. Noah held onto my arm as we walked toward the parking lot. His small frame pressed against me, as if clinging to my presence was the only anchor keeping him steady. Grandma, he murmured, his voice low, what if she tries to take me tonight? I stopped, crouching so I could meet his eyes. She won't. The judge said you're with me. That order protects you. He nodded, but the fear in his eyes didn't fade. Fear doesn't disappear with words. It lingers, especially in children who have learned not to trust promises. Inside the car, the silence was thick. I drove slowly, each red light feeling like an eternity. At one stop, I glanced at Noah. His head rested against the window, his reflection staring back at him, eyes glassy but dry. He was holding himself together in a way that was too adult for his age. Do you want to talk about it? I asked softly. He shrugged without turning. There's nothing to say. She doesn't want me. She just wants the money. The bluntness of his words sliced through me. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that his mother loved him in her own broken way. But lying would only deepen his wounds. Children know when they're being deceived. So instead, I reached over, squeezing his hand on the seat between us. You're not money, Noah. You're worth more than anything in this world. Don't ever let anyone make you think otherwise. His lips pressed together, and he gave the faintest nod. But I could see the doubt lingering in his eyes. When we reached the house, he didn't rush upstairs like usual. Instead, he stood in the hallway, staring at the family photos still hanging on the wall. Daniel's smile beamed out from several of them, his arm around a much younger Noah at birthday parties, soccer games, beach trips. My heart twisted, remembering the day those photos were taken. Daniel had always insisted on capturing moments, freezing time with his camera because, as he'd once told me, "One day, Mom, these pictures will remind us of everything we survived." Noah's fingers brushed the frame of one photo where he sat on Daniel's shoulders, laughing so hard his cheeks had gone red. He wouldn't want this, Noah whispered. He wouldn't want me standing in court, making recordings, fighting Mom. I swallowed the lump in my throat. You're right. He wouldn't want you to go through this. But he'd be proud of how strong you've been. Of how you told the truth. His eyes filled again, but this time he didn't fight the tears. He let them fall, his little shoulders shaking as I wrapped my arms around him. I just want him back, he sobbed. The ache inside me deepened, a hollow grief I had carried every day since the accident. So do I whispered against his hair. So do I. That night, Noah refused to eat much, only picking at the grilled cheese I made. He pushed the plate away finally, muttering, "Mom didn't make breakfast this morning either. She was too busy getting ready for court." The casual way he said it, as though hunger had become normal, made my stomach clench. After dinner, he retreated to the blue room. I lingered in the doorway, watching him sit cross-legged on the bed, flipping through a notebook. He didn't notice me at first. His lips moved as he whispered to himself, then he pressed his pen to the page, scribbling furiously. "What are you working on, sweetheart?" I asked gently. He startled, clutching the notebook as though it were a secret. After a pause, he handed it over. Inside were pages filled with dates, scribbles, and short notes. Missed pickups, weekends alone, arguments between Clara and Greg. His handwriting was uneven, slanted, but the details were painfully clear. "I've been keeping track," he said quietly. "Since Dad died. Just in case." My chest tightened, and I sat beside him, smoothing the pages. "Noah, you shouldn't have to do this. That's not your job." He shook his head stubbornly. "It's the only way anyone will believe me. Dad always said to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. So I'm standing up." I pulled him close, my throat too tight to answer. He was only 12, yet life had forced him into roles far beyond his years. Witness, recorder, protector of his own story. Later, after I tucked him in, I sat in the living room staring at the dim glow of the lamp. Clara's face haunted me, the cold look in her eyes as she realized Noah had exposed her. She wasn't finished. I knew it in my bones. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. A text from Ms. Parker. "Be prepared. Tomorrow Clara's lawyer will push hard, probably questioning Noah's credibility. Stay strong. We'll counter with the evidence." I typed back a quick thank you, but unease gnawed at me. Questioning Noah's credibility meant putting him under more pressure, forcing him to defend himself against his own mother's lies. How much more could his little heart carry? From upstairs, I heard the faint strum of guitar strings, halting, uneven. Daniel had been teaching Noah before the accident. The melody was familiar, a song Daniel loved. My eyes blurred with tears as the notes wavered through the house, shaky but determined. It was as if Daniel himself was reminding me, hold on. Fight harder. Don't let go. And I knew I wouldn't. No matter what Clara tried, no matter how much she twisted, I would protect Noah. Even if it meant burning every last piece of strength I had left. I didn't sleep much that night. The house was quiet, but the kind of quiet that carried too many memories. Every creak of the floorboards, every soft hum of the refrigerator reminded me of the nights after Daniel's funeral, when Noah had cried himself to sleep in the next room, and I had sat awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how we were going to survive. I made tea around midnight, hoping the warmth would calm me, but my hands trembled as I wrapped them around the cup. My eyes kept drifting to the photos on the mantel. Daniel in his graduation robe, Daniel holding newborn Noah, Daniel standing in front of his first car, grinning like he owned the world. Each picture stabbed at me, a reminder of what I had lost and what I was still fighting to protect. Upstairs, I heard Noah shifting in bed, a soft whimper escaping before silence returned. My heart ached knowing even in his sleep he wasn't free from worry. Children should dream of playgrounds, of summers by the pool, of silly adventures with friends. Not of courtrooms, lawyers, and betrayals. When dawn finally painted the sky, I brewed coffee stronger than usual. My reflection in the kitchen window looked older than I remembered, lines deeper, eyes heavier. But there was no time to fall apart. Today mattered too much. Noah shuffled into the kitchen, his hair sticking up in uneven tufts, his face pale with exhaustion. He dropped his backpack on the chair and slumped down, staring at the table. "You okay, sweetheart?" I asked, setting a plate of toast in front of him. He gave a small shrug. "Didn't sleep." "Me neither," I admitted softly. We ate in silence for a few minutes before he finally looked up, his eyes searching mine. What if they ask me questions today? What if I say something wrong? I reached across the table, holding his trembling hand. "Noah, there is no wrong answer. You just tell the truth. That's all anyone can ask of you. The truth is your strength." He nodded, but the worry didn't leave his face. He nibbled at the toast, leaving most of it untouched. When it was time to leave, I helped him into his blazer, smoothing the shoulders like I used to do for Daniel before job interviews. The memory caught me off guard, and for a moment I saw my son standing there instead of his boy. I blinked quickly, swallowing the grief before it spilled out. At the courthouse, the atmosphere felt different. Tenser, heavier. Clara was already there, standing beside her lawyer. She wore a dark dress this time, her hair pinned neatly, her eyes red-rimmed as though she had spent the night crying. But I knew her well enough to recognize performance. The way she dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, the way she clutched her lawyer's arm, it was a show meant for the judge. When she saw us enter, her gaze flicked to Noah, then to me. Her lips curled into the faintest smile. Not warm, not kind. A smile that said she was ready to fight, ready to destroy. We sat down, and Noah leaned close, whispering, "She looks like she's winning already." I whispered back, "Looks can lie, sweetheart. Remember that." The judge entered, and the room fell silent. After the formalities, Clara's lawyer stood. He was a tall man with slicked back hair and a voice that carried like a preacher's. "Your Honor," he began, "yesterday emotions ran high. But today, I intend to show this court that Noah's testimony, though heartfelt, may not be entirely reliable. He is, after all, a grieving child, confused, vulnerable, easily influenced." I felt Noah flinch beside me, his small shoulders tightening. My hand found his, squeezing firmly. The lawyer paced slowly. "We must ask ourselves, has Noah's grandmother perhaps shaped his perception? Fed him doubts about his mother? After all, grief can make children cling to the most present caregiver, even if that caregiver unintentionally paints the other parent in a bad light." My breath caught, fury rising. How dare he? After everything Clara had failed to do, after every night Noah spent hungry or scared, this man dared to suggest I had planted lies? The judge turned to Clara. "Mrs. Stone, you may present your side." She stood, her tissue trembling in her hand. "Your Honor, I've struggled since Daniel died. I won't deny that. But I love my son. Yes, I've made mistakes. Yes, I relied on others sometimes. But doesn't every single parent? Evelyn is trying to take him from me, to erase me. She spoils him with gifts, Tells him I don't care. But I do care. I always have. Her voice cracked perfectly at the end, her tears falling at just the right moment. Anyone who didn't know her might have believed her. I clenched my fists in my lap, forcing myself not to shout, not to break. Then the lawyer turned to Noah. Son, tell us, has your grandmother ever said your mother doesn't love you? Noah's lips parted, his eyes wide with panic. For a moment, he froze, glancing at me, then at the judge. His small chest rose and fell quickly, his breath shallow. I whispered just loud enough for him to hear. The truth, Noah. Just the truth. His voice trembled, but the words came. No. She never said that. Not once. She tells me Mom loves me, even when I don't believe it. The courtroom shifted. Clara's lawyer faltered, his rehearsed confidence cracking for a split second. The truth had a way of cutting through lies, and Noah had just spoken it. Clear, simple, undeniable. Clara's face hardened, though she quickly masked it with another sob. The judge leaned forward, his gaze steady on Noah. Thank you, son. That was important. Noah's shoulders slumped with relief as he sat back, and I brushed his hair gently from his forehead, whispering, You did so well. But inside, I knew this fight wasn't over. Clara's lawyer would dig deeper, twist harder. And I needed to be ready. For Noah, for Daniel, for the family we had left. Because losing wasn't an option. The lawyer adjusted his tie, his eyes narrowing at Noah as though he were not a child but a witness on trial. His voice grew sharper, words delivered with precision meant to rattle. Noah, you say you feel safe with your grandmother. But isn't it true she lets you do things your mother doesn't approve of? Late nights, too much television, special meals. Noah blinked, his brow furrowing. She lets me be a kid, he said quietly. The lawyer pounced. So she spoils you, doesn't she? She makes life easier, more fun. Couldn't it be that you prefer her house not because your mother is unfit, but because your grandmother indulges you? The words cut deep, and for a moment Noah looked down at his shoes, unsure. My heart hammered. Every instinct screamed to jump up, to shield him, but I forced myself to stay still. This was his moment, and he needed to be heard. Finally, Noah raised his head, his voice trembling but steady. Grandma doesn't spoil me. She makes me do my homework. She makes me clean up. She even makes me turn off the TV when I don't want to. But she's there. She doesn't forget. The silence after his words was heavier than anything the lawyer could muster. Clara shifted uncomfortably, her face tight with frustration. But the lawyer wasn't done. Noah, children your age can sometimes exaggerate. Do you think maybe your feelings toward Greg, your mother's partner, are influencing you? Perhaps you don't like him, and that's why you prefer your grandmother's home. Noah's little fists tightened on his lap. His voice dropped to a near whisper, but it carried through the quiet courtroom. I don't like Greg because he called me a burden. He told Mom she'd have more freedom without me around. Gasps rippled faintly from the benches behind us. Clara's face went pale, her hands clutching her tissue like a lifeline. The lawyer hesitated, clearly thrown off balance, before regaining his composure. Children mishear things all the time. Isn't it possible you misunderstood? Noah shook his head firmly. I didn't. He said it when he thought I was asleep. I wrote it down in my notebook. My eyes burned as I remembered the notebook he'd shown me last night, the pages filled with his careful, uneven writing. Evidence no child should ever have felt the need to keep. The judge leaned forward, his gaze piercing. Do you have this notebook with you, Noah? Noah looked at me nervously. I nodded, reaching into his backpack. My hands shook as I pulled it out, the little spiral-bound book that had become his secret record of survival. Your Honor, my lawyer said softly, standing to present it. This is Noah's personal journal. He has documented dates, incidents, and specific details since his father's death. None of this was coached. He did this on his own. The judge flipped through the pages, his eyes scanning the childish handwriting, the dates circled, the small notes like Mom forgot to pick me up again, or Greg yelled at Mom because I wanted dinner. He lingered on one page where Noah had drawn a small, crooked heart with the words, Dad would have cared. The judge closed the notebook slowly, his face unreadable, but his silence spoke volumes. Clara's lawyer cleared his throat, clearly unsettled. Children can be dramatic. Judge Harris cut him off sharply. Enough. This boy has shown more clarity than many adults I see in this courtroom. We will not dismiss his words as drama. Clara's mouth opened, but her lawyer shot her a warning glance, and she quickly sank back into her chair, her face flushed. Noah leaned closer to me, whispering so softly only I could hear. Did I do okay? I kissed his temple, my hand brushing through his hair. You did more than okay, sweetheart. You told the truth. That's all that matters. But inside my heart ached. He shouldn't have to carry this weight. Every word he spoke was a wound carved deeper into him, even as it revealed the truth to everyone else. When the judge announced a short recess, Clara stormed out of the courtroom with her lawyer close behind. The moment the door shut, Noah let out a shaky breath, his whole body trembling. I hate this, he whispered. I hate being here. Why can't it just be over? I pulled him close, letting him rest against me. I know, baby. I hate it too. But sometimes the truth takes time. We just have to keep holding on. His small voice cracked. What if the judge doesn't believe me? What if he thinks I'm lying like Mom said? I lifted his chin so he'd look into my eyes. Noah, listen to me. The judge isn't blind. He saw the notebook. He heard the recording. He saw you. You are stronger than you think. Tears slid down his cheeks, and he buried his face against my shoulder. I just want to stay with you. That's all. I held him tighter, silently promising myself that whatever it took, I would make sure his wish came true. Because this wasn't just about custody anymore. It was about love, safety, and the only family bond Daniel left behind. When we returned to the courtroom after the short recess, Clara's chair was still empty. Her lawyer entered first, face tight, whispering furiously into his phone. A minute later, Clara appeared. Her mascara had been redone, her lips freshly painted, as if she had stepped out to remake herself into the grieving mother she wanted the court to see. But her eyes betrayed her. Sharp, restless, simmering with anger. She avoided looking at Noah, though I caught the way her jaw tightened when she saw him sitting calmly beside me. His little hands folded neatly on the table. For a child who had endured so much, his composure was remarkable, though I knew every inch of him was trembling inside. The judge re-entered, his expression tired but resolute. We'll continue. His voice echoed across the chamber, drawing every eye back to him. Clara's lawyer stood, his confidence forced but unbroken. Your Honor, while we recognize the emotional nature of this case, I must remind the court that grief can alter a child's perspective. A boy who has lost his father might cling to a grandparent in ways that distort reality. We must not confuse comfort with competence. Mrs. Stone is the biological mother, and she deserves the opportunity to raise her son without interference. My lawyer rose slowly, her tone calm yet cutting. This is not a case of interference. This is a case of neglect. Noah isn't clinging blindly to his grandmother. He is reaching for stability. His journal, his recordings, his own words all show a pattern that cannot be ignored. He doesn't need indulgence. He needs safety. The two lawyers' words bounced across the room, but it was the silence after that seemed to matter most. Everyone turned to Judge Harris, waiting for his response. But Clara suddenly stood, interrupting. Her voice trembled, though her eyes flashed with something sharper. Your Honor, I admit I've been overwhelmed. After Daniel died, I made mistakes. I leaned on Greg too much. But I am still Noah's mother. I carried him for 9 months. I gave birth to him. I was there in his early years. Doesn't that matter? Doesn't blood matter anymore? Her words hung in the air like smoke, suffocating in their appeal to sentiment. The judge studied her carefully. Blood matters, Mrs. Stone. But so does love, consistency, and responsibility. Biology alone does not guarantee custody. Her face faltered, her lips trembling. She pressed her tissue hard against her eyes, forcing tears that didn't come. He's being turned against me. Can't you see? Evelyn wants to erase me. She tells him I'm not good enough. I bit my tongue so hard it hurt. Every fiber of me wanted to shout, to tell her she was lying, but I stayed silent. Because deep down, I knew Noah himself would answer in a way no one could dismiss. And he did. Noah stood up, his small figure trembling but determined. Grandma never said that. Not once. She tells me you love me. Even when you don't show it, even when you forget me, she still says you love me. She never erases you. You do that yourself. The words stunned the room. Clara froze, her mouth opening and closing like she had been slapped. Her lawyer shifted uncomfortably, clearly unprepared for a child's brutal honesty. The judge leaned back, his hand resting against his chin, eyes locked on Noah. Thank you, son. That was very brave. Noah sat back down slowly, his chest rising and falling in quick bursts. I touched his shoulder, whispering, "You did so well, sweetheart." Clara's face hardened, her tears drying instantly, her anger burning through her mask. For a moment, her gaze locked on me. Cold, venomous. She wasn't going to let this end quietly. She had too much to lose. The judge cleared his throat. We will recess for lunch. Court will reconvene this afternoon for closing statements. The gavel struck, and the room stirred into motion again. As we stood, Noah clung to my arm. His voice was barely a whisper. She hates me now. I could see it. I bent down, looking into his frightened eyes. No, Noah. She's angry. But she doesn't hate you. You are her son. That doesn't change. He shook his head, whispering, "It feels like hate." And in that moment, my heart broke all over again. Because he wasn't wrong. The look Clara gave him wasn't one of love or sorrow, it was of betrayal. As if her own son had become her enemy. I held him tighter as we walked out, silently vowing that no matter how deep her anger grew, I would never let it consume him. He had already lost too much. The courthouse cafeteria was crowded, full of lawyers in suits and families whispering anxiously over plastic trays of food. The smell of coffee and reheated sandwiches hung in the air, but Noah barely touched the grilled cheese I bought him. He just pushed the bread around his plate, his eyes fixed on the table as if he could disappear into it. I reached across, touching his wrist gently. "Sweetheart, you need to eat something. It's going to be a long day." He shook his head, his voice flat. "I'm not hungry." I wanted to insist, but I recognized the look in his eyes, an exhaustion that went beyond food. He wasn't refusing because he didn't want lunch. He was refusing because his stomach was knotted with fear. Instead of pushing, I offered softly, "How about just a few bites? For me?" He sighed, tearing off a small piece of the sandwich and chewing reluctantly. After a moment he whispered, "She looked at me like she hated me. Did you see it?" I swallowed hard. I saw her upset. Angry. Scared. "But Noah, that doesn't mean she hates you." His lips pressed into a thin line. "Feels like hate. Every time I talk she gets madder. What if the judge sends me back with her, and she takes it out on me?" The thought made my stomach churn. I leaned closer, keeping my voice steady. "If that happens, we'll appeal. We'll fight again. I won't stop. You hear me? I will never leave you alone with fear." He nodded faintly, though the tension in his shoulders didn't ease. As he picked at his food, my eyes wandered across the cafeteria. Clara sat at a table near the windows with her lawyer, their heads bent together. She wasn't crying now. She wasn't broken. She was calculating, her hands moving sharply as she whispered, her lawyer nodding. It chilled me, because it proved this wasn't grief. It was strategy. Noah followed my gaze and lowered his voice. "She's planning something." I reached over, covering his hand again. "Then we'll be ready for it." We sat in silence for a while, the noise of the cafeteria buzzing around us. At one point, Noah pulled his notebook from his backpack, flipping to a blank page. His small hand began scribbling, his pencil pressing so hard it nearly tore the paper. "What are you writing?" I asked. He hesitated, then turned the notebook so I could see. At the top of the page, he had written, "Reasons I want to stay with Grandma." Beneath it, he listed, "She makes dinner. She comes to school plays. She helps with homework. She listens. She doesn't forget me." My eyes blurred as I read the words, and I blinked quickly, not wanting him to see my tears. "That's beautiful, Noah. The judge will see the truth in you, no matter what anyone else says." He shrugged, muttering, "I just don't want to lie. I don't want to say things just to win." I cupped his cheek gently. "You don't have to lie. The truth is enough. It's always enough." The bailiff eventually came to fetch us, announcing court would resume in 15 minutes. Noah tucked his notebook away, clutching his backpack as if it were armor. As we walked back upstairs, I caught Clara's eyes again. She didn't look like a grieving widow or a desperate mother. She looked like a fighter ready to strike. Back inside the courtroom, the air was even heavier than before lunch. Clara's lawyer rose first for closing arguments. His voice carried the weight of performance, every word carefully measured. Your Honor, this is not a case of abuse or abandonment. It is a case of grief. My client lost her husband suddenly, and yes, she faltered. Who wouldn't? But grief should not disqualify a mother from raising her son. If Noah prefers the comfort of his grandmother, that is natural, but it is temporary. A child's desires cannot override the rights of a parent. Blood must count for something. His words rolled through the courtroom, appealing not to reason but to sentiment. He was clever, painting Clara's failures as temporary flaws, masking neglect as sorrow. Then my lawyer stood, her tone calm but firm. This isn't about blood. This isn't about grief. This is about Noah's welfare. Children don't invent empty refrigerators. They don't imagine missed pickups or cruel words. They don't fabricate being told they're a burden. Noah has been consistent, detailed, and heartbreakingly clear. He is not asking for luxury. He is asking for stability. For safety. For love. Her words struck like steady blows, quiet but undeniable. The judge leaned back, removing his glasses. Thank you. We'll reconvene tomorrow for my ruling. Court is adjourned for the day. The gavel struck once, and the sound echoed like a final warning. As people filed out, Noah clung to me tightly. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Tomorrow decides everything, doesn't it?" I kissed his temple, holding him close. "Yes, sweetheart. But no matter what happens, we'll face it together." And deep inside, I prayed with all I had left, that tomorrow, the truth would finally be enough. The next morning felt heavier than any I had lived through since Daniel's funeral. I woke before dawn, my chest tight with dread, my hands trembling as I poured coffee I couldn't drink. The house was too quiet, and every tick of the clock echoed like a countdown. Today was the day the judge would decide Noah's future. Noah came down the stairs slowly, his blazer wrinkled from the night before, his hair sticking up. He had clearly tossed and turned all night. He didn't speak at first, just sat at the table and picked at a piece of toast. His eyes were puffy, ringed with shadows no child should carry. I forced a smile, placing a hand over his. "It's the last day, sweetheart. Just hold on a little longer." He nodded weakly, but his lips quivered. What if he says I have to go with her? My throat tightened. I didn't want to promise something I couldn't control. Instead I whispered, "Then we keep fighting. But whatever happens, Noah, you will never be alone. I promise you that." When we arrived at the courthouse, the atmosphere was different. The hallway was lined with people whispering, their eyes following us. Clara stood near the entrance with her lawyer, her arms crossed, her face pale but sharp. She didn't look at Noah. She didn't even look at me. She just whispered to her attorney, her expression stiff and controlled. Inside the courtroom, the silence was thick. Judge Harris entered, his eyes heavy with the weight of responsibility. He adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "Before I deliver my decision, I will allow each party a final statement." Clara stood, clutching a tissue, her voice trembling as though rehearsed 100 times. "Your Honor, I know I've stumbled. Losing Daniel broke me. I may have leaned on Greg too much. I may have made mistakes. But I love my son. I am his mother. No grandmother, no matter how loving, should replace a parent. Please, give me a chance to be what Noah deserves." Her tears fell, but her eyes glistened with something sharper than grief. Then it was my turn. I rose slowly, my knees weak, my hands shaking as I held onto the bench for balance. My voice wavered at first, but steadied with each word. "Your Honor, I never wanted to be here. I never wanted to stand against Clara. But my son is gone, and Noah is all I have left of him. He is not asking for toys or privileges. He is asking for stability. For someone who will show up, who will not forget him, who will not put others above him. I am not perfect. I am old, and I am tired. But I will never stop being there for him. That is all I have left to give." My voice cracked at the end, and I sat back down, gripping Noah's hand tightly. The judge looked at Noah then. Son, is there anything you'd like to say before I deliver my ruling? The room fell silent. Noah stood slowly, his small frame trembling, his eyes brimming with tears. He glanced at me, then at his mother. His voice broke as he spoke. I just want to stay where I feel safe. With Grandma. I don't hate Mom. I wish things were different. But I can't change how she treats me. I can't make her remember me. I can't make Greg like me. But with Grandma, I don't have to try so hard to be wanted. She already wants me. The words silenced even the murmurs in the back of the courtroom. Clara's face twisted, her tissue pressed so hard it nearly tore. Then, to my shock, Clara stood abruptly, her voice rising. He's a child. He doesn't know what he wants. He's being manipulated. Enough, Mrs. Stone, the judge snapped, his gavel slamming down once. I will not tolerate further outbursts. Noah flinched at the sound, his small body trembling. I pulled him close, whispering, It's okay. I'm here. The judge leaned back, removing his glasses and rubbing his temples. The weight of his silence pressed on us all. Finally, he spoke, his voice deliberate, heavy with finality. I have considered the testimony, the evidence, and the welfare of the child. This is not a case I take lightly. But the law is clear, the child's best interest must guide this court. And Noah has made his wishes known with remarkable clarity. He will remain in the custody of his grandmother, Evelyn. Mrs. Stone will have supervised visitation, pending further review. The gavel struck once more, echoing through the chamber like thunder. Noah gasped, clutching me so tightly I could barely breathe. His tears spilled freely now, but they were tears of relief, of release. I don't have to leave, he whispered against my shoulder. No, sweetheart, I whispered back, holding him as tightly as I could. You're safe. You're home. Behind us, Clara sank into her chair, her face crumbling for the first time. Not in performance, not in anger, just raw, silent defeat. But even as relief washed over me, I knew this wasn't the end. Clara's eyes, red and swollen, lifted once more to meet mine. And in that look, I saw it. The fight wasn't over. She would be back. And I would be ready. When the gavel struck for the final time, something inside me broke open. Not in pain, but in release. For months I had carried the weight of fear that I would lose Noah, that Daniel's son would slip through my hands the way my own child had. But in that moment, as Noah clung to me with all the strength his little arms could muster, I felt a lightness I hadn't known since before the accident. We walked out of the courtroom slowly, our steps shaky but sure. Reporters called out questions, cameras flashed, but I kept my head low, shielding Noah with my arm. He had already given the world too much of himself. He deserved to walk away in peace. Outside, the crisp air hit our faces. Noah tilted his head up toward the sky, his eyes blinking against the light. For the first time in months, I saw something new in his expression. Relief. He breathed deeply, almost as though the world finally allowed him to exhale. Grandma, he whispered, his voice trembling but lighter, I don't have to pack a bag anymore, do I? I don't have to wonder where I'll sleep. Tears welled in my eyes as I pulled him close. No, sweetheart. This is your home. You'll always have a place here. He pressed his face against my shoulder, and for once, I felt the weight lift from his small body. Clara exited behind us, her lawyer close at her side. She didn't cry this time. She didn't shout. She just looked at us with a hollow stare, her hands clutching her purse as though it were the only anchor left. When her eyes met Noah's, he stiffened. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no words came. Instead, she turned and walked quickly down the steps, her heels clattering against the stone. Noah watched her go, his voice quiet. Do you think she'll ever love me the way Dad did? The question pierced my soul. I bent down, brushing the hair from his eyes. Sweetheart, your dad loved you with every breath he had. Your mom, she's lost right now. Maybe one day she'll find her way back. But until then, you don't have to doubt if you're loved. Because I love you. Enough for both of us. He nodded slowly, his lips trembling, but there was peace in his eyes I hadn't seen before. That evening, back at the house, we sat together at the dinner table. For once, Noah ate without hesitation, devouring spaghetti and garlic bread as though hunger no longer sat like a shadow over him. Later, he curled on the couch beside me, clutching the old photo of him and Daniel at the beach. "I think Dad would be happy," he murmured sleepily. "He'd know I'm okay now." I stroked his hair gently, my throat tight. "He'd be more than happy, Noah. He'd be proud. So proud." He drifted off to sleep, his small body finally at rest, his breathing even and soft. I watched him for a long time, memorizing the peace on his face, silently thanking Daniel for giving me this boy to love, to protect, to guide. And in the quiet of that moment, I understood something. Family is not measured by blood alone. It is measured by presence, by love, by the choice to stay even when things get hard. Clara had lost her way, blinded by grief and greed. But I could not change her. What I could do was be here for Noah, every day, in all the little ways that mattered. Because in the end, love is not about who brings a child into the world. It's about who stands by them when the world falls apart. And that was the lesson Daniel left me with, the legacy Noah would grow up knowing, that the truest family is not just given, it's chosen, through love, through sacrifice, through the promise never to let go.